Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Zone Star State podcast. I'm Matthew Brune, and joining me once again is Ishmael Johnson. And Ish, we have some breaking news to talk about today. Stephen F. Austin fires head coach Kyle Keller, who took over in 2017, so about 9 seasons at the helm in Nacogdoches. It didn't catch us off guard. We had talked about how bad this team has been this year, especially offensively, just jarringly bad. But you sent it to me last night. You told me last night, and I was like, wow, they actually did it.
Yeah. I saw the press release. It came out, we're recording on Thursday, came out Wednesday evening, night, I guess night. Wednesday night or evening. But regardless, it felt like one of those things, one of those moves where you're like, they wouldn't, right? Probably should, but they wouldn't. Almost 10 years. I think Matt Norlander was going through some of his accomplishments. He said he made the NCAA tournament in 2018, would have gone in 2020 had COVID not canceled the season. That season, his team beat number 1 Duke in Cameron, which I remember that game. That was the layup at the buzzer. And then one of the most notable regular season upsets in college football history over the past 15 years. And now, what was a record? 8-11, right? And they are currently, as of his firing, 1-7 in the Southland, right? Just above East Texas A&M. So if you'd have told me this in 2022, looking back at 2022, 22-10, 123 in KenPom, and I believe they lost to ACU in the tournament, in the conference tournament, which I think ACU went on to. Did they go on to? No, they lost in the championship, the conference championship. So they went on to make a run in the NIT, though. If you'd have told me that at that point that it would go so badly that they would end up firing, I thought he'd get. To me, I thought he was somebody who was in line for jobs like the caliber of UNT, right? I thought that was his next step, but clearly, I think the thing, in my opinion, we can kind of take as maybe an indication is I don't know if he handled the transfer portal era very well. Because you look at, I think he was able to build some good teams, but I think maybe the consistency of having to do that at a program like SFA year in, year out consistently. I mean, if we're just looking at the team since he took over, or since 2020, when the portal and then COVID waivers and NIL came into play, his teams got worse. And his teams got, they got less talented because everybody was taking his players, and he wasn't able to rebuild that. Now we see players like Latrell Giselle at UNT, somebody that he relied on last year. And so it's okay, eventually, if you're not built for that style or that this new era, you're going to kind of eventually have a bottoming out.
Yeah, you have to be able to replace the players. I mean, Ross Hodge and/or Texas lose a bunch of players, replace them. I mean, every team in basically the mid majors has to do that, and it's pretty clear that he did not have the talent going into the year. We had heard of these players and we talked about some of them, but it definitely was not the top end talent that they needed. They brought in Chris Johnson from Texas. We had hoped he would do something. He hasn't played since the 3rd game of the season. So just kind of a perfect storm that went wrong for them. And then you get, from SFA's perspective, you drop down to the Southland. That's fair to say that's a drop down from the WAC. Fairly significant drop down. And now you are 1-7, and you're losing to Houston Christian, Incarnate Word, Southeastern, A&M Corpus Christi, UTRGV. Those are programs that, A, you have more resources than, and B, you have a stronger foundation. And because of the success that you had along the way, you should not have this type of drop off. Even if your team's not as good, it still is at least as talented as RGV, as Incarnate Word. You should not be 1-7 in the Southland. So again, it's a perfect storm of situations where the transfer portal hit them, then they didn't replace it. You drop down a level, and you're still not winning. It's one thing if you had stayed in the WAC and maybe, the Utah Valleys and whatnot are beating up on you, but you can't lose to Nichols and Houston Christian and whatnot. That's what makes it so much worse here. And honestly, I don't know. Like they were 355th in offense, 84th in defense at Kim Palm. So they're still playing some defense, but at the end of the day, there is no evolution to what we've seen from Kyle Keller. His teams have been the same every single year. We see Joe Golding at UTEP put together kind of a balanced sort of team after a couple years of learning on the job. He puts together a balanced team. This is year 9, and we're seeing the worst version of the Kyle Keller's program now in the Southland.
Yeah, there was the one thing I will say is similar to Reagan Peebley at TCU. I think that they were robbed of their best year because of COVID. Of course, we talk about Reagan Peebley. That TCU team would have made the tournament her year, and that probably would have given her a better launching pad to the next couple of years. That obviously ended up bottoming out. Kyle Keller didn't bottom out necessarily until this year, but you look back at that 2020 team, 28-3, right? Losses to Rutgers, Alabama, and then a conference loss to Corpus Christi. But that is the team that went to Cameron and beat at the time number 5 Duke. They finished number 1 in turnover percentage on defense, number 3 this is in the country, by the way. Offensive rebounding percentage, 31st in offensive effective field goal percentage. If you remember that team, Kayvon Harris, Gavin Kensmill, Cameron Johnson, Rhodey Ware, right? That is like, those were all of the guys that were like at the peak of their. I think Nathan Bain was he was one that had the layup game winner, but he was a role player on that team. Like that was a team that I think could have maybe given him a launching pad to another job, right? Like that, as we've seen time and time again, all these the coaches at this level just need that 1 year, right, to get their name out there to a national crowd and a national audience. All of a sudden, he's at A&M, or UNT or whatever. As we saw Grant McCaslin, right? That he takes UNT to the tournament. All of a sudden, his name's everywhere for like 2-3 years. And Kyle Keller never quite had that breakout. And I wonder if he was kind of robbed of that with that 2020 year. Again, that you can look at a bunch of coaches probably that didn't have their best year. But I do think that we were 28-3 and not getting to go to the tournament because of COVID is, it's one of those like unfair situations of that season.
Yes, it definitely is. You look back at his first couple years, especially like it's so weird because 2018 they were also excellent. They made the NCAA tournament and lost to Texas Tech. They were 28-6, and then 2019 they just completely fall off the map. They were 14-16, 7-11. Then 2020 they have that incredible season you were talking about. And so what made that 2019 season, they're able to put up with is because 2018 was so good, and then you follow it up, you get the benefit of the doubt, and in 2020 you're awesome. There's no benefit of the doubt here for Kyle Keller because last year, while they were okay, like they were 10-10 in conference. All right, like that's a decent year. But SFA has standards now because of the 2018 and 2020 seasons that what
we know with Brad Underwood, right?
Yeah, of course, it started with Brad Underwood.
It started with, started with Danny Casper for so many years. He leaves, they bring in Brad Underwood. They have a miracle win over VCU in the tournament. He goes on, obviously does what he does, but like all of a sudden SFA is like I don't think people realize like they've only made the tournament like once since Underwood left. Like that's something that like we remember those SFA teams is like, oh yeah, they're just going to make the tournament, right? That was like kind of almost a shoe-in at some point, and they haven't. And it's like, yeah, at some point you got to kind of look at what you were and figure out like, okay, we know the standard here can be a lot higher. And so, we don't have to spend too much time on this, but I'm curious about how much SFA has to spend, right, on a head coach. Because obviously this is their sport. This and football, obviously their sports. They've invested a little bit in football. They have a decent recruiting classes and things like that. But like, okay, this is the first time they've had to really make some moves in basketball in almost 10 years. What does that look like? And what names are out there? Obviously, you can presumably go assistant, right? Brad Underwood was an assistant when they brought him in. Or do you look at something like a Jim Shaw at Corpus? And do you have the money to poach him? Yeah. Right. Like I'm saying, I don't know. This is me speculating. Do you have the ability to look at somebody in conference and say, that guy's got something?
They need to look. high. Like they should hold themselves higher than the Southland. And I don't know if that's unfair since they did, they are in the Southland, but I believe they moved to the Southland because of football primarily, correct? I think we talked about that briefly. But like as
I
a
think
basketball
I think there
program,
was one point where they thought the WAC would have.
yeah,
They
like
were hoping the
football.
WAC would come back in football, and then the WAC would kind of hopefully elevate to FBS one day, but
Yeah.
didn't manifest.
Yeah. So the past 20 seasons, Stephen F. Austin, if you compare their past 20 years to everybody else in the Southland, it's not close.
Yeah.
It's not close at all. Like they are substantially, the gap between them and whoever second place is in the last 20 years, like Corpus Christi or whatever, is huge. So they should approach this as saying, we should be able to go get a significant coach that can help us get back to where we want to be, because they should be, if not winning the Southland, they should never be worse than third or fourth in the Southland ever. Like that. If that's the case, then we have lost one of the pillar programs in the state of Texas, which would be sad, because the last 20 years they've been very competitive and making NCAA tournaments, like you said, and had good coaches, and we've lost that the past couple of years. And so hopefully they can get it back and they make a big hire.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that this is a job that should be looking at like some of the best programs around the state and looking at their benches and say, look, like what FAU did with Baylor, right? We're going to go get Jakic, right? We're going to go get John Jakic. And it's like, I think SFA, obviously not to that extent, but like they can look at some of the top benches and say, we've won here. Can you continue to do that? We have a standard. So I'm very curious to see the candidate pool. I'm not going to act like it's easy to recruit to Nacogdoches, but as we've seen in the past, talent can go there, man. Talent can go there.
Yeah. All right. More men's basketball reaction. We can get to some games now. Last night in the SEC was absolute insanity. There were 3 games where teams did not lead. Well, 2 games where they didn't lead until the last shot, and then one more where they didn't lead until the last minute or so. A&M headlines that, where they beat Ole Miss despite trailing by 8 with 2 minutes left. And I watched this game and I'm just like, okay, A&M, they just don't have enough, right? Wade Taylor was 2 of 12, 4 points, 5 turnovers. And I'm like, okay, they just don't have enough. And I can't even describe the last run. Zurich Phelps was huge, and Pharrell Payne was huge, but like they go on a run to end the game, and where do you even start? Because it's not a good win. Like I'm not saying like, oh, A&M is now like this SEC contender, but like this is the win this is a type of win you need to have in the SEC to elevate yourself. Like, oh yeah, we are going to end up 12-6 instead of 11-7, 10-8 and stuff like that. This is a huge win for A&M.
Yeah, no, I mean, also Manny Obaseki hitting the game winner, shooting 30% from the year. He goes 2 of 3 from 3 in this game. Look, I tweeted this after the game, and I texted you. I was like, "That's why this game is why you get Zurich Phelps, right? Like this game exactly, because you look at the last 5 minutes of the game, like he's the only one, because Wade Taylor's off. Wade Taylor kind of takes a back seat, and it's interesting because when Wade Taylor's off, he's that player who I don't want to keep shooting. Last year we saw that, right? Like when he's off, you just have, but he needed to last year because that was all they had.
Yeah.
Zurich Phelps, on the other hand, if he's off, you kind of still want him shooting because he's going to get some stuff. He's going to get free throws. He's going to get to the line. He's going to generate a ton, which is what he did in that second half. He got to the rim and he might have missed like layups, but like Pharrell Payne was there to get an offensive rebound. And you just look at the last bucket, right? What was that? That was him getting the ball downhill, boom, kick out. Manny Obaseki hits a 3. Like I saw that entire last 5 minutes, and I'm like, that's the difference. Like he is the difference this year with this team. That it sounds weird, but it's like they literally just need somebody putting shots up, and if it goes off, okay, they're good enough to rebound, right? They're good enough to just beat you on the offensive glass. 14-6 on the offensive glass. Pharrell Payne was fantastic. 10 points. A lot of those were putback style lay-ins, and they just in the end. And this is not something you can say. They bullied a Chris Beard team. Like that's what happened at the end was they just were more physical than a Chris Beard team, which is probably the biggest compliment you can play to Buzz Williams.
Yeah, Ole Miss has Beard and Mark Adams on its bench.
That's right.
Really,
it's just disgusting ball.
Yeah, that is A&M's up to 7th in the country on defense. I didn't realize it was that. They held Ole Miss at 36%.
If you would have told me that again, I say this after I complimented him. Like if you would have told me at the beginning of the year that they would be a top 10 defense with Zurich Phelps, I don't know if I would have believed that. But he's been pretty good this year on defense. So it's just a whole team effort. And we were the same show a couple of years ago that was asking what the hell is Buzz Williams' vision, and this is it, man. Again, like you said, it's not like the biggest win in the world, but it is like a win that like I'm impressed by, like the way they won.
Yeah. Like you said, 2 years ago, we were talking about they were 8-5, like 75th in KenPom in the non-conference. And now they've been able to like retain their players and then also add Pharrell Payne and Zurich Phelps, who we knew going into the year were going to be good, but Pharrell Payne is top 30 in the country in block percentage. Like
he's
Phelps
fantastic, man.
Phelps is now top 20 in usage percentage and shot percentage in the country. Like he is just like taking it to the back.
He has that Russell Westbrook quality of just like downhill every single time. And as a defender, you hate that. Like eventually, like you want somebody that if you stop them, 5 times, they're not going to go at you 6. Mm-hmm. But if you stop Zurich Phelps 5 times, he's going to go at you another 5 times.
Yeah. So now 4-2 in conference for them. Texas, Oklahoma, South Carolina. Like this stretch, they really don't have a tough stretch here. I'm looking at it now. They end the year fairly tough. Their last 5 games, they include Tennessee, Florida, Auburn. But until then, Texas, OU, South Carolina, Missouri, Georgia, Arkansas are their next 6 games. Like very winnable games. KenPom has them 11-7 in conference as a projection right now. When you can steal a road game at Ole Miss, man, that is massive. That is absolutely massive. Yeah, we'll see how they do moving forward here. I didn't want to talk about North Texas men got a big win over Temple, and now 5-1.
I didn't see this game, but I saw I think first I saw the spread, which I think was it minus 9.5 or plus? Yeah. It was minus 9.5, which I was very surprised by.
Yeah, and then North Texas almost covered, won by 9, 76-67. My takeaway here, first of all, I think they said this is the 4th straight year they've started 5-1 in conference, or 5th straight year. You know how crazy that is?
That is
to start
nuts.
5 straight years, 5-1 in conference. Yeah, they're now, first or tied for first in the American. We'll see how it all plays out. But this was a big win because Temple had beaten Memphis. And so now you create that kind of triangle where Memphis beat North Texas, North Texas beat Temple, Temple beat North Texas, for whatever tiebreaker reasons you may need. But they're 5-1 now, and I think you look at KenPom and you go over to the American Athletic Conference, and Brennan Laurent is 3rd in the AAC's Player of the Year race, only behind PJ Haggerty and Yaxel Lindenberg, who are both probably NBA players. Probably draft picks, honestly. Brennan Laurent has been so good, and he is like I don't say this lightly, he is a souped up version of Thomas Bell right now.
Okay.
Like that's how he's playing. He is 46 in the country in block percentage, 1st in the AAC. He's top 12 in the conference in defense rebounding, top 20 in offense rebounding, and then he can shoot. He is now he's only 5 of 6 from 3 in conference play in what is a 6th game, so he's only taking 1 game. But he hit one last night, and it's just it's there. And then he's 58% from 2. This guy just does literally everything on the court. And Ross Hodge after the game kind of compared him to Thomas Bell because of the blocks. He had 5 blocks last night.
Yeah, I was about to say he finished with 5, which is nuts.
I'm just this dude is if Thomas Bell had a jumper and a little bit more offensive polish to him, because now we're talking about a guy you can run your offense through, and they have one of the best backcourts in the American with all of these guys that you could name.
Finished with 23 and 13, 5 blocks, or 20 and 13, excuse me, and 5 blocks. He's hit, at least according to the UNT, I was following along on Twitter at least, 7 of 9 from deep in his last last 9 attempts from 3. Again, that's not saying he needs to shoot like 3 a game, but like if he's shooting 1 a game, like that, you're okay with him kicking that one, kicking that one out to him.
Yep.
And the one thing I want to say about this too is obviously we knew UNT's Ross Hodges' calling card will always be defense, but the way they shut down Jamal Mashburn, like Jamal Mashburn's been stellar. And what was he? He had 16 points, but it took how many shots? 20 plus shots basically to get there. And I did see the one block that Lorient had on him where he got switched onto him, and Jamal Mashburn thought he had a little bit of a breakdown ISO moment, and he tried to hit a step back mid range, and Lorient got to it, and it was like a little bit of a tip, and you're just like, okay, like this is UNT's game. Like you knew that if Mashburn can't hit those that he typically creates, it's a wrap. It's a wrap.
Yeah. This is, of course, the first year I don't cover them full time. Like this is probably like one of my favorite North Texas teams I've seen, because this isn't just Tyler Perry bail us out, Javion Hamlet bail us out, like Jason Edwards bail us out. This is legitimately like we have Jasper Floyd, Atten Wright, Latrell Giselle, Jonathan Massey. They have never had a group of 4 guards as good as that. Like they've had Hamlet and James Reese and so on, but like have those 4 that can create for themselves in this way, they've never had that before. And so you add that with a Rondell Walker and a Mulai Sissoko, and they're up to 58th in Ken Palm. I think in the net they're around the same. I've seen people talk about them as a potential at large if they go like 17-1. They're not going to go 17-1 in conference. We do this every year as North Texas fans. It's like, can they somehow sneak an at large berth? The answer is no. They won't. But it's still a very, very good team. And in the American this year, it's Memphis 1, it's North Texas 2, and then there is a fairly steep gap between the rest of the conference. Not saying they can't be beat or anything like that, but UAB I think is 3rd. They're 104th in Ken Palm. They're a good team, but like after that it's the Temples, it's FAU, and so on, like good teams, but not like it was in years past where you'd be like, heck, UAB was a top 50 team in La Tech back in the day and in Conference USA and stuff like that. So it is setting up in theory for North Texas Memphis to be the little 1-2 race here, and we'll see how it goes. The last thing on the men's side, this was a busy week on the men's side. What do we make of VJ Edgecombe? I don't want to talk about the whole game. Baylor beats Kansas State. I didn't take too much of it, but like VJ Edgecombe dropped 30. So
yeah, I mean, look, you put it to me right, because I basically was like, Baylor, what was that? And you were like, hey, look, we got a good VJ Edgecombe game, and I'm like, you know what? Fair. I'm choosing positivity.
Yes. And not that they were losing for 3
not that they were losing to Kansas State, who's awful this year. I'm gonna look at, you know what? VJ Edgecombe did drop 30 points. Good job.
Yes, that's how we're approaching this, because Baylor is.
They were losing this whole game. They were losing this entire game.
Yeah, I was like,
and then like in the last, what was it? Like last 5 minutes, they took the lead.
Yeah, Edgecombe scores some. Like they have enough talent. Celestine hits a 3 or 2, and so it's cool. But VJ Edgecombe legitimately put this team on his back for like a stretch. He's hitting 3s. He's so freaking athletic. When he goes to the rim, he just hangs there and can finish any which way, through contact, over contact. This was an awesome showing, especially for his like draft stock, because this previous season high was like 2021. So for him to have 30 on this volume, like this is what NBA scouts would be like, hey, this is here. We can look at Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey and all these guys that can put up 30 plus regularly. Edgecombe is capable of that. And I was worried about the 3-point shooting earlier in the year. I'm still not sure he's like an elite 3-point shooter by any means, but the form looks more reliable. He looks more confident in it. I'm not sure what he's even shooting in conference play, but it just looks a little better in terms of, he's up 13 to 34, so 38% from 3 in conference. Like if that holds, if he's over 35%, like that does wonders for his draft stock and Baylor.
Yep. Exactly. Because Baylor kind of needs him to step up.
Roach didn't play last night, so if you want to add an asterisk to why they were losing, sure. But It's the same old. All right, I have 4 results real quick on the men's side. Now I want you to pick one that was the most substantial.
Mm-hmm.
Texas Tech beats Cincinnati on the road. Texas beats Missouri at home. Houston beats Utah by 34. And SMU loses to Louisville by 25.
Oh, yeah. It might be SMU losing to Louisville.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I do think Texas, that's a good win. Like, I don't want to make that. I want to make that clear, right? That's a good win. Needed win as well. They were they were about to be 1-5 in conference, so that's a good win. Trey Johnson, Arthur Kaluma had a great game in that one, by the way. It looked like Missouri just did not have the physicality to deal with somebody like Kaluma, so good win there. But yeah, SMU, after we just finished talking about how really well they've started in the ACC, and here comes a decent test to see if they're really, if they're really there for it. And it's like,
They were down like
Louisville
24. It was
Look, Louisville looks like they've kind of hit a really good resurge under Pat Kelsey in his first year. So they could just be really good. And I do want to say, like, it was a disappointing result, but like, if this just means that SMU is let's say only a top 5-6 team in the ACC, like, okay, that's still better than what I thought they'd be.
Yeah, like the gap between them, Duke, North Carolina, and Louisville, like those 3 teams compared to where SMU is probably bigger than what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah,
that much.
SMU could finish 7th, and I'd probably still be like, okay with, like, I'd be honestly still fine with their season.
Yeah, they have Clemson and Pitt as the only 2 other top 50 teams on their schedule, so we'll see how those go. But still, again, like you said, if they go like 12-8 in conference, I'm still rolling with it being a good year.
It was just more of a bummer than it was like a disappointment.
Yeah.
I was hoping.
Yeah, so it's not Houston beating Utah by 34 points and only holding them to 36.
I mean, look, at this point, it's just like y'all gotta play somebody before, because this right now it's getting sad for these other teams. Y'all gotta play somebody good, because Houston's just that much better right now.
I mean, and I say this, they had just struggled with UCF a bit, but like that's the clear outlier here, because every other result is by 20 plus points. This is like the best. This is the best team against non-quad 1 games. Like non-quad 1 games, this team just mauls people, and everybody else, like you said, we'll have to see. They play Kansas on Saturday, so we'll know very, very quickly. On the women's side, we're gonna have to end this on a somber note.
Yeah,
TCU loses to Oklahoma State, and you texted me. Did you text me, or one of my friends texted me OSU? Someone texted me OSU.
Oh, it was me. It was me.
It was you? Okay. And I was like, they did not. You said OSU wins, and I said they did not. I turned it off at halftime when I saw Haley Van Lith hit an and one to put them up 15 points, and I said, all right, cool, we don't got to worry about TCU. And then Oklahoma State, and even in the fourth quarter, I believe it was in a 10-point game with about 5.5 minutes left, and then Oklahoma State just storms back, and TCU forgets how to play offense and turns the ball over left and right. Haley Van Lith with a couple like key turnovers late, and then Madison Connor taking bad shots. I didn't know what was going on, and TCU ends up losing the game to Oklahoma State. I don't know. What do you think?
I think they miss Una Jovanovic right now, because she didn't play, and it had a lot of minutes for the likes of Taylor Bigby and Donovan Hunter. And I think, again, that's not the reason they lost. They were up by a ton, and so they should have been able to close this out. But I do think without the likes of Una Jovanovic, what did Madison Connor finish 2 of 9, right? Una Jovanovic is that fourth player, right? That unit plays so well, and they all have their roles so well defined that, like, it just kind of shows how fragile that is. And I mean, what did she finish? Let me see. Taylor Bigby and Donovan Hunter did not have a great game down the stretch in particular. Like, they were a lot of the mismatches on defense. They were a lot of the ones getting caught off screens. There was one quick turn that Donovan Hunter got, or I think it was Bigby, who got kind of a baseline turn during the fourth quarter. And it was just like, oh man, like, it's just one of those things where they're being put in crunch time situations right now, and that's not your crunch time lineup. And even when it was 6, it just looked like it was going to keep going. Even when Sedona Prince got a couple buckets late, I think they even stretched it back to like 10, 11 at one point. And after that point, it was just like it wasn't enough.
The most staggering thing, and they talked about this on the broadcast, how Oklahoma State was deeper and could be more fresh down the stretch. I personally think, like, these college players should be able to, like, with plenty of rest and whatnot, should be able to play like 35 plus minutes. But there's a difference even between playing 35 minutes and playing 40. Like Prince, Van Lith, both 40, Connor 38, Eminopu 38. That's just that's a lot.
Yeah. And I wonder, like, I don't know, because I agree with that. Like 40, I mean, that's the whole game. And so, but like Aaliyah Robertson only played 2 minutes. So it's like, was this a game that you just didn't think you could play her because you needed somebody on the offensive end to keep scoring, right? And so maybe what she gave you on defense lengthwise, she wouldn't make up for. Because like, I agree. Like, even if that 40 is taken down to 38, like, just give her some rest. But also, I can understand if you're Mark Campbell, you're like, hey, they're coming back. We need to be able to get buckets too. For Haley Van Lith, that's a little bit different because, like, without Una Jovanovic, like, I don't know what other guard you put in the game. Usually you can run some minutes of Connor and Jovanovic, but like without both of them together, it's like, maybe you can't.
Yeah, so that's something that's been present in every game, like their minutes total. And I'm not like super concerned. Oklahoma State is one of the more streaky teams in the conference. A very good team, but just lost to Houston, and that should never happen. But we have TCU versus Baylor on Sunday, the 26th. So that's now
very interested about that one.
That's now 2 teams that are playing, a 1 loss apiece in conference, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I'm going to look at the seed list on bracketology real quick. I know it's only January, but I've already started looking at bracketology stuff. Baylor, 6th seed potentially, and this was as of 2 days ago. So, and then TCU a 3 seed as of 2 days ago. Feels about fair.
It does. I'm very curious about this game because this was the game last year that I was at, TCU at Baylor, where it kind of felt like TCU hit a ceiling, right? Where it was like, oh, they had a great start, and this is when they were healthy. TCU was fully healthy at this point, but it still felt like they hit a wall as far as how good they could be. And so I'm like, okay, how much is that gap closed? I'm curious. Obviously, I think they should be favorites, but like, is it a double-digit win? Is it a close win? Is it a loss? I don't know. So I'm very curious to see the makeup in 1 year.
Who would you have favored? Who do you think? Like, who are you going to pick? It's at TCU.
Right now, I took TCU. I would.
I agree.
I just don't think that they have a. I'll say this. I think last year they obviously had Sedona Prince, but I do think that I don't know if they have a Sedona Prince and Haley Van Lith stopper, in my opinion. So I think that duo is going to be too much.
This will be the ultimate test. Speaking of the depth, like, Baylor's deeper, like way deeper. Baylor can play 7-8 comfortably. Bring Yaya Felder off the bench, bring whether it's Fauneroy or whoever off the bench substantially. I think that's going to be the biggest thing for me. Does that depth actually come back to bite them? Because I'm looking at now Baylor's minutes per game this year. They only have one player over 20, one player over 30, and it is Jada Walker. Jada Walker's at 31, Sarah Andrews 29, and then you kind of go down from there. So it's gonna be a huge game, huge game. We'll talk about on Monday. So, anything else? I'm trying to think.
Nope, that's it.
I think
that's all for me.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, that's all we got for y'all today. Hope y'all enjoyed the podcast. Leave us a like, comment, share, subscribe if you haven't already. We'll be back on Monday to recap what's going to be a very, very eventful weekend. So stay tuned for that, and we will talk to y'all later.